Religion is all about our relationship with God. And this is a very important passage today. God is saying, abide in me, and I will abide in you. And whatever you ask for will be given to you, meaning your prayers will be answered in God's time and in the right way. But that presence will be with you. But we have to open ourselves up to it. God doesn't impose himself. He never inflicts his presence. We have to desire his presence. We have to open our hearts to that presence. The path of yoga is very interesting because it doesn't have a list of beliefs that you have to ascribe to. It tells you the goal. Yoga tells you the goal, tells you how to reach the goal. And it gives you thousands of examples of realized yogis who have achieved that goal. And by tuning into them, they can help you with your goal. The goal of yoga is union with God, union with spirit. It's mystical ecstasy that we read that the saints have had. That's the goal of yoga. Expansion of consciousness to embrace infinity. Perfect love, perfect peace, perfect joy, that bliss that's beyond words. That's what yoga tells us is the goal. Not just for a chosen few, but for every soul. Each of us is on the path to that state of consciousness. And yoga tells us how to get there. Yoga practices of many kinds, meditation techniques, relinquishing the ego, relinquishing that grip that the ego has, that sense of I and mine and what I like and what I don't like. Reminds me of a story about a raccoon. When we lived in Ananda many years ago, it's very much out in the woods, especially in those days. It was a pretty unpopulated area. So there were a lot of animals, and raccoons in particular were a bane to our existence. They have a little hand, an opposable thumb, and so they can open doors. And also refrigerator doors. They can grab the honey jar and dump it on the kitchen floor. They can take everything out of the refrigerator and crack all the eggs into the honey. So we came upon a plan. I didn't personally do it, but others would trap the little guys and relocate them to some miles deeper into the woods. So there was a little trap, little wire mesh trap, and we would bait it with something like a stick with peanut butter on it and fix it in the middle of the little cage, and the animal would walk in through one of the open sides of the cage, and when he got to the bait, the door would close and he would be trapped. And many were the lucky little raccoons who got to experience relocation. But one famous one in particular didn't go through the open door to get at the bait. Instead, he put his arm through the side and grabbed the bait. But the problem was he couldn't get his hand back now. So he had a dilemma. Let go of this and escape, or hang on and see what happened. So this little guy decided to hang on. And in the morning, people came. He still wouldn't let go. They picked up the cage with him hanging on, and they carried him off for relocation. And the whole time, he wouldn't let go. Well, the next time that your ego asserts itself, think about that little raccoon. Think about his little white knuckles hanging onto that peanut butter, and pry your little fingers off of that whatever it is, anger, dislike of other people, criticism, complaining, whatever form the ego is testing you with, tempting you with, just let it go and feel the freedom of not having to be relocated or having to go through those tests again, because that's the thing with tests. Until we pass that grade, we keep having the same ones over and over and over. This world is a school, but when we graduate, we find bliss. It's all worth it. All the saints say the same thing. It's all been worth it once they get there. So we have the example of yoga masters who have reached that goal. They've done their homework. They've passed those tests. They have gotten to the point where God is abiding in them, and they are abiding in God. That's what we need. So when we see these yoga masters who have found the goal, who are part of that light, if we try to tune in to their lives, their teachings, their consciousness, remember, they've transcended life and death. It's of no consequence to them. They're part of all that is. They have a living consciousness. There was a disciple who read Autobiography of a Yogi. This was many years ago. And he knew Yogananda was his guru. And he wrote to Yogananda, this was in the 50s, and he said, I want to be your disciple. Teach me. And a letter came back and said, I'm sorry, but Yogananda passed away just a few months ago. And the man was devastated, and he searched the world over, looking for someone who could be his guru. And he finally found a very honorable, deep soul, and he said to this man, please, will you be my guru? And the guru said, Yogananda is your guru. And the man said, yes, but Yogananda is dead. And the guru said, Yogananda is alive. It's you who are dead. So this is a living consciousness. God is part of every cell of our body. He knows every thought we have, every feeling we have. He's not far away. He's just on the other side of that door, the door of the heart. And if we open that door, he is waiting to come in. So if we study these teachings, it's a very interesting thing that happens. The way to study is not to cram, or not to speed read, or not to go, yes, I remember when the very first time I read Sri Yukteswar's book, the second from the right there, his book, The Holy Science. I really tried. Excuse me. I read every single word. I closed the book and I went, well, I didn't get anything out of that. I'm going to have to try that again in a few years. And I did. And a few more I tried again, and I kept getting a little bit more and a little bit more. I realized, wow, what a treasure. But take a passage of one of these many spiritual books. We have a whole buffet of spiritual books. You can taste all kinds of wisdom. Read it again and again until you really understand it. You know what it is saying. And then read it some more. Read it until you feel it in your heart. It becomes one with you. You have realized that wisdom. And then, just as this reading says, you will become awe-stricken. There's no other word for it. Awe-stricken. And when you feel that sense of awe, your heart will open. And through that opening in the heart, that's when attunement is possible. The love is what magnetically draws you to that presence and feeling and knowledge and fulfillment of God's presence in your heart. St. Augustine said, "Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in Thee." There's a part of our hearts that will never be satisfied, that will never be fulfilled until we experience that which we were born for, the presence of God. Abide in Him, and He will abide in you.
This affirmation that we did on consideration for others finishes with the words, readiness to perceive the truth no matter what garb it wears. And as I was pondering that little turn of phrase, I was reminded of one of the more colorful characters that we came to know in India when we were building a community outside the city of Pune, in the countryside. One of the people who came with the property was sort of the caretaker of the area, with the name Baba. I mean, he had an actual name. That Baba just means father, and he was kind of a father. He had 5 daughters, and he was sort of an older fellow. He wore this outrageous pink turban. It was just stunningly electric. And so I was contemplating, the garb that it wears. And in my dream, I dreamed about him last night. And in my dream, I was describing this turban to somebody. And in the dream, he not only had the incredible pink turban, he had a pink beard to go with it. Anyway, it was quite striking. But he was an interesting character, in more than just his turban. I remember him, the very first time we explored the land, he wanted to show us the view from up high. And this was October, the monsoons had just finished, which meant that everything was lush and green and growing and wild. And this hill was so steep that you could reach out and touch the hill in front of you. I mean, that is pretty darn steep. And the foliage was so dense, I mean, it was like 5 or 6 feet tall, that there was no way you could sort of pass through it without a little help. Well, Baba was the help. He was not just the guide leading us up the hill, he was also the machete hacking and getting, clearing a path for us to make it up this hill. He shot up this hill. It was unbelievable. I mean, this little old guy, he's probably 5'10", and he probably weighed about 120 pounds, and he was all sinews and muscle and go power. He had an interesting characteristic, because we got to know him a little bit more as we moved to the land and lived there. The only thing that could upset him, the only thing, is if he didn't have enough to do. It annoyed the daylights out of him if he was not occupied. It was like, give me something to do. And he volunteered for, there was a period of time when there was construction going on, and we had, lots of materials there, and later on we had appliances, we had all, stuff that was fairly valuable going into these homes that were being constructed. And some of it walked away. In fact, during one morning sadhana, our air conditioners walked away. They walked up over the mountain too, which was really interesting. It's not so easy to get over that mountain with an air conditioner. Well, anyway, he volunteered to be the night watchman, on top of working all day long. This was just because it was like, I just really need to be occupied. And we tried that for a little while, but we discovered that even supermen need to sleep occasionally, and he ended up sleeping a little too much during the night. But we loved that spirit. And in connection with this reading today, Christ is saying, when you abide in me and I abide, when we abide in God and God abides in us, we will bear much fruit. And I was reflecting on, what is it, much fruit? Are we all supposed to plant orchards and the trees are going to be really productive and we get much fruit from them? It's more that our lives are sending that joy. That joy is coming through us. And in meditating on this, I had a realization about Swamiji that I'd like to share. We saw, from living with him, the example of someone who was amazingly productive, inwardly and outwardly. 150 books, 400 pieces of music, a couple of which you've heard and will hear today, communities, photographs, art. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And it's easy to be a little intimidated by that and think, oh, well, so, is that the example I'm supposed to follow? What struck me in this week was what motivated all that productivity was not restlessness or some sort of push from behind saying, you have to produce, go, get up in the morning, produce. It was joy. It was the joy of God's presence inside of him was so much that he could not help but produce. He could not produce. He could not share with others. There's a sweet little story that I read recently. A class of young children were asked, what are the 7 wonders of the world? And so, they discussed it a little bit, and different ones listed different ones, the pyramids in Egypt, the Great Wall of China, the various ones that are sort of classically recognized. But there was a little girl off to the side who had not sort of finished the assignment. Everyone else had handed their piece of paper in. And the teacher asked, are you having trouble? And she said, yeah, there are so many. And the teacher said, well, maybe we can help. Why don't you give an example of what you see as the 7 wonders of the world? So she named off the ones that she had. To taste, to feel, to hear, to see, to smell, to love, to laugh. And at that point, the teacher thought, hey, these are pretty good. These are wonders of the world that are not built by human hands, but in fact express themselves through us. And it would be well for us who meditate, many of us, and practice these things, as Nirmala was describing, the path of yoga with its smorgasbord of opportunities to grow. It would be well for us occasionally to step back and ask the question, how awe-stricken am I? When is the last time that I was awe-stricken? That I was struck dumb with the joy of God. That is a good measuring stick for how much of that we are receiving. Recently, we had a Tai Chi class here, and Nirmala and I attended, and several others. And it was a marvelous way to experience, because the teacher is a deep Kriyaban and an expert martial artist from decades, teacher of martial arts. It was wonderful to sort of get those two things juxtaposed together. And he made the observation, helped us to have the experience that there is a flow in life, there is a flow of grace that moves through us, and we can feel that, we can experience that. It grows inside of us, and the deeper and deeper we feel it, it's a living energy, it's a living presence within us. And all of us, whatever we practice, whatever we do, we have to learn to receive. We did this exercise the other night in which we were moving energy, and one person had to receive that energy. And he commented to us, the giving part is pretty easy for most people in this regard. It's the receiving part that's actually kind of challenging, because you have to get yourself out of the way. As Nirmala was pointing out, like the little raccoon that's hanging on to whatever it is, we have to get ourselves out of the way enough that we can allow God's grace to come. Meditation has been described as listening for God's answer. When we offer a prayer, when we say a prayer, typically it's a request. Typically it's a calling to God for some kind of response. But the effort, and it's a very sensitive effort, but it's a definite, serious effort, is to be still enough to listen and actually tune in. Some weeks ago when Asha was here, she related the story of working on this enormous project of trying to incorporate Ananda village into a California city. And the initial requests were refused, and we were thinking of taking another step, potentially a legal step to push the process forward in a different way. And that morning, Swamiji was in meditation, and he asked Master, is this the right thing? And he felt the answer very definitely, no, it's not. We've tried, we gave it our best shot. This is not what's trying to happen. And she was obligated to kind of spin on a dime because the word hadn't gotten to her. This was long before cell phones. In fact, it was long before telephones at all at Ananda. And so she sort of got the news in the moment, and being perhaps champion of the debate team, she was able to flip the case and argue for all the reasons why we shouldn't go forward in the moment, and did a very good job. But afterwards she asked Swami, you got this guidance, but I was the one working on the project. Why didn't Master tell me? And Swamiji very simply asked, well, did you ask him? And it was like, no, I didn't actually. Well, we all have that job too. We all have to ask too. God, what are you asking of me today? How can I experience more of that abundance, more of that joy, more of the peace in our hearts? When is the last time that we were so overflowing with inner peace that we couldn't help but bless others with it? We often think that we are defined by the things that we have done. We are not defined by the things that we have done. They influence us. And they may influence us. The other day I was watching a man walking through a parking lot, and he was striding along. He's an older fellow, had a baseball cap that undoubtedly had some kind of military experience, because the look in his eye, I finally realized what the word keen means. He had a keen look in his eye. It was like, don't mess with me. I was in the army or the whatever, I don't even know what it was. I fought, we won, nobody is going to mess with me. And I thought, okay, you can take that as your posture in life. Yes, you did that, and that's a wonderful thing. But receive, his posture and his way was not inviting inner peace and bliss. According to me, anyway, that's what I was perceiving. But all of us, I'm not his judge, but we can be our own judge, and we can say, I guess I didn't quite hit the mark there. I remember repeating to Swamiji a cute little turn of phrase that had become popular for a little while at Ananda. The phrase was, "No good deed goes unpunished." And it was, there's a little bit of a ring of truth in it, a little bit, not a whole lot. And I happened to say that to Swami, because something that we meant to go well had obviously blown up somehow or the other. And so I sort of shrugged it off by saying that to Swami. And he took that in for a second, and then he said, "That's not quite right." He said, "No good deed ever goes unchallenged." And that's an entirely different thing. And I realized that's attunement. That is simply attunement. He didn't have to flex his muscles and flex his brain and kind of, it was like, no, that isn't in tune with the music. The music says, no, you do something good, yes, it will be challenged to see if it's true or not. We can learn to expect that. Punished? That's nonsense. You're not getting punished for doing something good. But you will occasionally be challenged for doing something good just to see. That kind of attunement in the moment is something we can each one of us achieve. Meditation helps tremendously because it gives us an inner sense of, we listen closely enough, we hear the music. Then we hear, is my instrument or is my voice in tune with that music, or is it off tune? If it's off tune, let me lower the volume a little and let me listen a little harder. And then I can hear more correctly and get my voice or my instrument or whatever it is in tune with that. All of us can learn that skill. It is a gift. It should be one of those wonders of the world that little girl was saying, getting in tune, being attuned. I noticed, to my slight dismay, that the word attunement is not actually a word. At least according to the dictionary, it's not. Tune, attune, attunement, for some reason, is not in the dictionary. But I think it's a spectacular word, and it's one that should stick on our refrigerators or on the bumper stickers of our car. Well, actually, it's better to have it where we can see it, because it's not really a command to the universe, but it is an inner command for ourselves. Let us learn to be in tune, and we will find that God is abiding in us and that our lives are productive of the joy that must be shared and given to others.